The one who always called me firecracker when I was little. The one who slipped me $20 bills and birthday cards and told me I reminded her of herself when she was younger. I held my breath as the dots blinked in and out. Then, she hit send. My parents have always spoken in absolutes. Things were either right or wrong, clean or dirty, respectful or disgraceful. There was no room for nuance in our house. No gray area where feelings could live, stretch, or question things. You were either behaving or you were a disappointment. I learned that early. I used to think all families operated like that. That the thick tension at dinner tables was normal. That, "Are you really going to wear that?" was a mother's way of showing concern. That silence after sharing something personal wasn't hurtful. It was just how parents reacted. It wasn't until much later, college maybe, that I understood how conditional their love could feel. Growing up, I was the sensitive one. The one who cried too easily, asked too many questions, and didn't like to be told what to think. My brother fell in line, my sister floated under the radar. But I was always pushing up against something, even when I didn't mean to. Even when all I wanted was to be understood. My dad used to say I had a defiant streak. I used to believe him. I thought maybe I was broken, too loud, too emotional, too much. But my aunt never made me feel that way. Aunt Lena was the only adult who didn't treat me like a walking headache. She didn't just listen, she heard me. When I was 14 and got into an argument with Mom about not wanting to go to confirmation class, she took me for milkshakes and let me talk for 2 straight hours. She didn't agree with everything I said, but she didn't interrupt. She just nodded, handed me napkins when I got teary, and told me that asking hard questions wasn't a sin. "Sweetheart," she said, pushing her sunglasses onto her head, "don't let them shrink you to fit their comfort." That line stayed with me for years. I wrote it in my journals, doodled it on notebook covers. I repeated it to myself in college when I chose creative writing instead of pre-law. And again when I came out as bi and the conversation with my parents ended in raised voices and the word confused repeated like a curse. That night was the first time I really knew I was the outsider. Not just different but wrong in their eyes. A miscalculation. An inconvenience. It's not that they stopped talking to me. It's worse than that. They talked less, loved quieter, and looked at me like I was a project they'd failed. Holidays I was still welcome. But their eyes scanned me for damage. Their hugs had become formalities. The incident last week, what triggered the message, wasn't the first conflict, but it must have been the final straw for them. We were at my sister's engagement dinner, and something I said lit the match. I won't get into the details now, maybe I'm still not ready, but it ended with my father standing, my mother crying, and me walking out of the restaurant with my heels in my hand and mascara streaking down my cheeks. Thought someone would call, or at least check in. Instead I got silence. And then, the message. What makes it all more painful is that they didn't just hurt me. They hurt the version of me that still wanted to belong. That small, stubborn part of myself that kept hoping for a different ending. Some version of my family where I didn't have to keep auditioning for approval. That's where Aunt Lena comes in. She saw that part of me. Protected it. I think she recognized something of herself in me. Some bruised, battle-worn corner of girlhood that never got to fully grow in her own time, her own way. She was the only one who ever said, "You don't have to explain yourself to people who've decided not to listen." And now, here she was, typing in the group chat, breaking the silence. Saying something, anything when no one else would. That alone felt like a lifeline. It happened at my sister's engagement dinner. The restaurant was one of those overpriced places with soft jazz playing in the background and dim lighting that made everyone's skin look flawless. The table was long and crowded. Immediate family, extended relatives, and her fiancé's parents, all dressed like they were auditioning for a lifestyle magazine spread. I'd put on a navy dress that I loved. Simple, flowy, nothing provocative, but Mom gave it that look when I walked in. Her eyes scanned me top to bottom, and her lips curled into that tight, practiced smile she reserves for situations where she can't say what she really thinks. I ignored it. I'd already rehearsed that night with myself a dozen times. Smile. Compliment the bride-to-be. Don't rock the boat. And for the first hour I didn't. We toasted to love. We passed around plates of seared salmon and garlic potatoes. I even managed small talk with my brother, who seemed to have adopted Dad's distant disapproval like an heirloom. But then came the slideshow. Someone, probably my sister, had compiled a digital slideshow of childhood photos. It was sweet mostly, until a photo popped up of all three of us kids. Me, my sister, and our brother, standing on the back deck in the middle of summer, popsicles in hand. I couldn't have been older than 12. My arm was around my sister, my smile lopsided, my hair an untamed mess. Dad chuckled and said, "This was before you started dressing like a protest sign." A few people laughed, unsure if it was okay to. Mom sipped her wine, her eyes flicking toward me but not staying long. I forced a smile. "Nice one." But then my sister's fiancé said, "Wait, what does that mean?" And Dad, like he'd been saving the line, said, "Just that our middle child always had a flair for turning heads. Not always in the right ways." That was when something cracked. I looked at my father, who was smiling like he'd just won a round of trivia. Then I looked at my mother, who was suddenly very busy slicing her asparagus. And then I looked at my sister, who just laughed nervously and reached for her wine. "I'm sorry," I said. "Is this the part of the evening where we roast me?" "Come on," Dad said, holding up his hands. "It was a joke. You're always so sensitive." There was sensitive, the word they've always used to shut me down. Sensitive like fragile. Sensitive like flawed. "No, it wasn't a joke," I said. My voice was shaking. "You're always doing this, taking little digs and hiding behind that smile. And everyone just lets it happen." "Sweetheart, please," Mom said, like I was embarrassing her in front of the in-laws. I looked around the table. Not one person was meeting my eyes. "It's exhausting," I said, standing up. "Being around you people. Always walking on eggshells, pretending I don't hear the way you talk about me like I'm some kind of burden." "Sit down," my father said, low and sharp. But I didn't. Couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my purse, kicked off my heels under the table, and walked barefoot through the hushed restaurant and out the door. I expected someone to follow me. Maybe my sister or Mom. Even just a text from someone saying, "Are you okay?" But there was nothing. No one. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel, trying to swallow the feeling that I'd just burned the last bridge holding us together. But deep down, a quieter voice whispered, "It was already ash. You just admitted it out loud." The next day, silence. The day after that, still nothing. 3 days later, I got a forwarded invitation from my sister. Bridal shower planning. No personal message. Just a calendar link. As if nothing had happened. As if I hadn't stood in front of them and cracked open years of tension and pain, only to be met with blank stares and pursed lips. And then, 2 days after that, the message. "Mom and Dad, we believe it might be best for you to distance yourself for the time being." I stared at the screen, my stomach knotting all over again. No mention of what happened. No question about how I was doing. Just a line of text delivered like a verdict. Like I was a disruption they finally had the courage to remove. I didn't cry right away. I was too stunned, too tired. But the ache behind my ribs, that came immediately. That deep, hollow ache of being written off by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. And yet, right before the silence swallowed me whole, Aunt Lena typed and hit send. The message popped up just below my parents' sentence, like a light flickering on in a dark hallway. "Aunt Lena, I'm sorry but I don't agree with this." My breath caught. Another line appeared. "If we're cutting people out for speaking honestly about how they feel, then maybe the problem isn't them." She wasn't done. "She's not too sensitive. She's human. And she's been walking on eggshells around this family for years. Maybe instead of pushing her away, we should ask ourselves why she finally broke." Silence. Complete and total silence. No one replied. Not my mom. Not my dad. Not my sister, who usually rushed to keep the peace. Even my cousin, who never missed a chance to share his opinion, stayed quiet. The little typing dots blinked under Mom's name for a second, then disappeared. And that was it. I just stared at Aunt Lena's words. I must have read them 20 times in a row, my eyes blurry, my fingers numb. No one had ever stood up for me like that. Not out loud. Not publicly. Not in that space, the sacred family group chat, where conflict usually got glossed over or ignored, where everyone played their part and avoided hard truths. She could have texted me privately. Could have told me she was sorry I was going through this, or something vague and diplomatic. But she didn't. She stepped right into the fire and said what no one else dared to say. It wasn't just what she wrote, it was that she saw me. She saw the years of small comments, tight smiles, silent punishments. She saw the exhaustion. And she named it. I sank onto my couch and let the tears come. Not the ugly, gasping sobs of heartbreak, but the quiet, shaking kind. The kind that leak out of you when you're finally allowed to breathe. When someone tells you that you aren't crazy. That the pain you've been carrying isn't imaginary. It wasn't a full rescue. Didn't fix everything. But in that moment, Aunt Lena handed me something no one else had. A sense of being worth defending. And maybe, for the first time, I started to believe it too. After Aunt Lena's message, the group chat went dead. Not just quiet dead. Like the air had been sucked out of the thread. No memes. No forwarded articles. No birthday wishes for my cousin 2 days later. My parents didn't respond to her. Not publicly. Not privately. Not at all. And even though I knew that silence wasn't mine to carry, I still felt the weight of it. For 2 days, I checked the chat every hour like it was a wound I couldn't stop picking. I wanted something. Response. Rebuttal. Even a passive-aggressive reply. Anything that would at least acknowledge that Aunt Lena had said what she said. That I wasn't imagining all of this. But nothing came. On the 3rd morning, Lena texted me privately. Hey kiddo. Do you want to come over? I've got leftover lasagna and a bottle of wine with your name on it. I stared at the message for a while. My instinct was to say no. Not because I didn't want to see her, I did, but because I was still swimming in guilt. Still unsure of what I was allowed to feel. But I said yes. When I arrived at her apartment, she pulled me into a hug before I'd even taken my shoes off. It wasn't the kind of hug people give when they don't know what else to say. It was the kind that says, you're safe here. All of you. We didn't talk about the group chat right away. We ate first. Her lasagna was still amazing, even slightly burnt on the edges. And then we sat on her couch with glasses of cheap red wine and no TV on, just the two of us and the weight of everything between us. Finally, I asked, do you think I was out of line? She didn't flinch. No. I think you finally said something they didn't want to hear. I took a long sip of wine, letting her words sit. But what if I was too harsh? I mean, maybe I could have said it differently. Maybe I should have just kept quiet. She looked at me, eyebrows raised. Why is it always your job to make it easier for them? Did they make it easy for you? That stopped me. Because no, they hadn't. For years I'd been swallowing things. Toning myself down. Taking deep breaths and counting to 10. Letting them make jokes at my expense. Rewrite my intentions, diminish my choices. And when I finally spoke up, when I finally said, this hurts, they called it an overreaction. And then they cut me off. Still, part of me ached to fix it. I hated tension. Hated feeling like I'd messed up a formula I was always trying to solve. What if I owe them an apology? I whispered. Aunt Lena sighed and tucked her legs beneath her. Listen, if you decide to apologize one day, that's your choice. But don't do it to make them comfortable again. Do it only if you believe you were wrong. And from where I'm sitting, you weren't. I looked down at my wine glass, the little red swirl catching the light. I don't even know what wrong is anymore. That's because they've trained you to question your reality, she said gently. It's how control works. They bend the rules until you can't tell whether you're standing up for yourself or being selfish. Her words hit like a stone dropped into a still lake. Quiet but deep. I didn't say much for the rest of the evening. We talked about other things, work, her cat, the movie she wanted to see. But when I left, she gave me another hug and said, "You're not broken, you know. You've just been told that for so long, you started to believe it." That night in bed, I replayed the dinner. Not the words but the expressions. My mom's avoidance. My dad's smugness. My sister's silence. And for the first time I let myself believe that maybe it wasn't me. Maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe I was just the first one willing to say the truth out loud. I didn't rush to respond. Days passed. I waited for clarity, for calm. I wanted to be sure that what I said came from my center, not from the need to please or from the ache of rejection. And once I felt that steady, quiet knowing settle into me, I opened the chat and clicked reply. Then I paused. Text felt too hollow, too easy to misunderstand. So I recorded a voice note instead. My hands trembled as I held the phone, but my voice, when it came, was steady. "Hi, Mom. I've been thinking about your message. And I wanted to say something back. Not to argue and not to try to fix anything right now. Just to be heard." I took a breath, then continued. "I know I upset you at the dinner. I didn't plan to. But I also can't keep pretending everything's okay when it isn't. That moment wasn't just about a joke. It was about years of feeling like I had to shrink myself to be accepted. Years of being the problem, the punchline, the disappointment." I glanced at the floor, the carpet blurring beneath my eyes. "I'm not saying I've been perfect. I know I haven't. But I'm done apologizing for the ways I'm different. I'm done walking into rooms with you and bracing for the next comment. I love you both, but I need you to know that love doesn't feel safe when it comes with conditions." There was a pause in my recording. I didn't cut it. I wanted the silence to sit there like a mirror. If you want to talk, really talk, I'm open to that. But I won't chase after crumbs. I won't beg to be let back in. My voice softened, cracked just a little. "You're my parents. That still matters to me. But I matter too." I hit stop and stared at the screen. 1 minute and 47 seconds. It wasn't everything I'd ever wanted to say. But it was enough. Enough truth. Enough heart. Enough of me. I sent it. Then I put my phone down and walked outside barefoot onto my tiny balcony. The sun was setting, bleeding soft orange across the sky. I didn't know if they'd reply. I wasn't sure I even wanted them to, not yet. But I'd said what I needed to say. And for the first time in a long time that felt like enough. 3 days later my phone buzzed. One new voice message. From my mother. I hesitated before pressing play. Her voice came through tight, careful, like every word had been sifted through a filter of propriety. "We got your message. We're sorry you feel that way. That was never our intention. We've always tried to do what's best for the family. Maybe some time apart is what everyone needs right now." That was it. No mention of what I said. No acknowledgement of the pain. Just a quiet dismissal, wrapped in polite language and emotional distance. And I felt nothing. No rage. No urge to cry. Just a kind of clarity I hadn't had before. Their love came with rules. Love us as we are. Don't question us. Keep the peace. Don't make it hard. That was the cost of being in. And I finally understood that I wasn't willing to pay it anymore. Aunt Lena came by the next day with blueberry muffins and a stack of old photo albums. She kicked off her shoes like she owned the place and plopped onto my couch with a sigh. "You know," she said, flipping through a photo of her in the 80s with wild curls and combat boots, "they didn't speak to me for almost a year after I told your grandfather I wasn't going to marry that banker from New Jersey." And blinked. "I never knew that. They never mention the stories where they're the villains," she said, grinning. "But believe me, I've worn the black sheep badge too." We spent the rest of the afternoon laughing, crying a little, sharing the quiet. Felt like exhaling. I still checked the family chat sometimes. Mostly out of habit. I watched them plan my sister's shower, comment on a cousin's new job. My name didn't come up. But I didn't feel erased. Not anymore. In a strange way, the silence gave me space to start hearing myself again. To listen to the girl who had been begging to be seen for years. And now I was finally seeing her. Strong. Still healing. Still here. There was a time when silence from my family would have shattered me. Back then I would have read into every non-reply, every pause, every polite smile that didn't reach their eyes. I'd twist myself in knots trying to earn back love I thought I'd somehow misplaced, like a button I'd lost on the way home. But now, I sit in the stillness, and it doesn't feel like abandonment. Feels like space, like breath, like a quiet room where, for once, I can hear my own voice. Aunt Lena's words lit something in me. Not just her defense, but her defiance. The choice to speak when silence would have been safer. She reminded me that love isn't real if it demands your silence. That speaking your truth, even shakily, is still an act of love. If not for them, then at least for yourself. I used to think I needed resolution to move on. That my parents would one day call, apologize, say they understood. I imagined the scene in my head 1,000 times. My mom crying, my dad finally saying he was proud of me, not in spite of who I am, but because of it. But I don't need that anymore. What I need is already happening. I'm learning to stand without needing permission. The pain isn't gone. There are moments, watching a family video, hearing a song from childhood, where the ache sneaks back in. But it doesn't undo me. It doesn't erase the woman I'm becoming. Just reminds me how far I've come. Sometimes I think about the message my parents sent, the one that started all this. We believe it might be best for you to distance yourself for the time being. Hurt. Broke something. But it also made room for something new. Their silence cleared space for a voice I had buried beneath shame and fear. A voice that was mine. I don't know if we'll ever fully mend things. I don't know if they'll ever see me, really see me. And maybe they won't. But I see me now. And so does the one person who spoke when no one else would. And that is enough. So yes, my parents asked me to step away. And now, finally, I have. But not in exile. In freedom.